The 19th century was a period of significant social and economic transformation. Industrialization spread across Europe, generating immense wealth but also severe poverty. In this environment, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels wrote the published in 1848. This pamphlet offered a critical analysis of capitalism and advocated for a workers' revolution. Marx and Engels argued that capitalism was fundamentally exploitative. They believed that a fair and just society could only be achieved by abolishing private property and establishing collective ownership of the means of production. Their ideas resonated with many who felt marginalized and oppressed by the capitalist system. Marx and Engels believed that history was driven by class struggle. They envisioned communism as the ultimate outcome of this struggle. The proletariat, or working class, would rise up against the bourgeoisie, or capitalist class. This revolution would lead to a classless society where everyone was equal. These ideas, though radical at the time, would significantly influence the 20th century. The ideas of Marx and Engels did not immediately lead to revolution. However, they provided a compelling ideological framework for revolutionaries worldwide. It was in Russia, a vast and largely agrarian empire, that communism would first take root and flourish. By the early 20th century, Russia was a country on the brink of collapse. The country was ravaged by World War I. The Tsarist regime, increasingly autocratic and out of touch with the suffering of its people, faced widespread discontent. In this context, the Bolsheviks, a radical communist faction led by Vladimir Lenin, saw an opportunity to seize power. The Bolsheviks promised peace, land, and bread. They capitalized on the war weariness of the population and the deep inequalities that plagued Russian society. In October 1917, the Bolsheviks launched a nearly bloodless coup that toppled the provisional government and ushered in the world's first communist state. The Russian Revolution sent shockwaves across the world. It was a victory for communist ideology and an inspiration to revolutionaries everywhere. The Bolsheviks moved quickly to consolidate power and implement their vision of a socialist society. Private property was abolished. Land was redistributed to the peasants. Factories and industries were nationalized. The Bolsheviks faced stiff resistance from the outset. A bloody civil war erupted, pitting the Red Army, loyal to the Bolsheviks, against the White Army, a loose coalition of anti-communist forces. While the Soviet Union was grappling with the challenges of building a socialist state, communist movements were gaining ground in other parts of the world. In China, a vast and ancient civilization struggling under the weight of foreign imperialism and internal strife, a young revolutionary named Mao Zedong was emerging as a key figure in the Chinese Communist Party. Mao, a charismatic and ruthless leader, adapted Marxist-Leninist ideology to the Chinese context. He believed that the peasantry, not the urban proletariat, would be the vanguard of the revolution in China. Under Mao's leadership, the Chinese Communist Party waged a protracted guerrilla war against both the ruling nationalist government and the occupying Japanese forces during World War II. By 1949, the Communists had emerged victorious from the Civil War, and Mao proclaimed the founding of the People's Republic of China. Mao's victory had profound implications for global geopolitics. China, with its immense population and strategic importance, was now firmly in the communist camp. Mao embarked on an ambitious program of social and economic transformation. His goal was to rapidly industrialize China and collectivize agriculture. The Great Leap Forward, launched in 1958, aimed to transform China from an agrarian society into a modern industrial powerhouse virtually overnight. The horrors of communist regimes reached a terrifying peak in Cambodia under the Khmer Rouge. Led by the brutal dictator Pol Pot, the Khmer Rouge seized control of Cambodia in 1975. They envisioned a radical transformation of Cambodian society, aiming to create an agrarian utopia. However, their methods were shockingly brutal. the Khmer Rouge emptied the cities, forcing millions into the countryside for agricultural labor. They targeted intellectuals, professionals, and anyone deemed an enemy of the revolution. The Cambodian genocide, as it became known, resulted in the deaths of an estimated 2 million people, nearly a quarter of the population. The Khmer Rouge regime was marked by extreme paranoia, violence, and a complete disregard for human life. The regime's atrocities were met with international condemnation, but it took a Vietnamese invasion in 1979 to finally topple the Khmer Rouge. The Cuban Revolution, led by Fidel Castro, was a pivotal moment in the history of communism. The revolution began in 1953 and culminated in 1959 with the overthrow of the Batista regime. Under Castro's leadership, Cuba became a one-party communist state, aligning itself with the Soviet Union during the Cold War. The revolution brought significant social and economic changes. Land reforms were introduced, healthcare and education were made universally accessible, and the government sought to eliminate racial discrimination. However, these changes came at a steep cost. Political repression became a hallmark of Castro's regime. Dissent was not tolerated, and thousands of political opponents were imprisoned or exiled. The nationalization of industries and the imposition of state control over the economy led to significant economic challenges, exacerbated by the US embargo that remains in place to this day. Despite these hardships, Castro's Cuba became a symbol of resistance against US imperialism in Latin America and inspired revolutionary movements across the globe. The legacy of the Cuban Revolution is complex, marked by both its achievements in social justice and its enduring political and economic struggles. Vietnam's journey towards communism was marked by decades of conflict and struggle. The Vietnam War, which lasted from 1955 to 1975, saw the communist North Vietnam, led by Ho Chi Minh, fighting against the anti-communist South Vietnam and its allies, including the United States. The war ended with the fall of Saigon and the reunification of Vietnam under communist rule. Today, Vietnam remains a one-party socialist republic, with the Communist Party of Vietnam maintaining tight control over the country's political and economic life. In the early 21st century, Venezuela embarked on a socialist experiment under the leadership of Hugo Chavez. Promising to uplift the poor and redistribute wealth, the country initially saw improvements in social indicators. However, economic mismanagement, corruption, and falling oil prices led to a severe crisis. Shortages of basic goods, hyperinflation, and mass emigration marked the decline of what was once one of Latin America's wealthiest nations. The story of Venezuela serves as a cautionary tale of the complexities and challenges of implementing socialism in the modern era. Following World War II, Korea, previously under Japanese rule, was divided along the 38th parallel. The Soviet Union supported the Communist North, while the United States backed the capitalist South. This division led to the Korean War from 1950 to 1953, a devastating conflict that solidified the peninsula's partition. In North Korea, Kim Il-sung established a totalitarian regime that became increasingly isolated from the rest of the world. Kim implemented a policy of juche, or self-reliance, which emphasized national self-sufficiency and isolation from foreign influence. This policy, while presented as a way to protect North Korea from foreign imperialism, had devastating consequences for the country's economy and its people. Under Kim Il-sung and his successors, Kim Jong-il and Kim Jong-un, North Korea has faced chronic food shortages, economic stagnation, and a horrific human rights record.